But where's the park, Papa? On one of the doggier of last summer's dog days, my family and I simmered grimly in our own juices as we toiled along a bit of the flotsam in a sluggish river of traffic. Our rate of speed was somewhere between a creep and an ooze. Heat waves pulsed in a blue sea of exhaust fumes. Blood boiled and nerves twitched. Red-faced, sweating policemen would occasionally appear and gesture angrily at the drivers to speed it up or slow it down. At least one of the drivers felt like gesturing back. We were on one of those self-imposed exiles from the amenities of civilized life, popularly referred to as vacations. I was in my usual vacation mood, which is something less than festive. My kids were diligently attempting to perfect the art of whining, while my mother expressed her growing concern and disbelief at the sparsity of restrooms along this particular stretch of highway. Whenever the speed of the traffic slowed to an ooze stage, my wife took the opportunity to spoon tranquilizers into my mouth from a cereal bowl, all the while urging me not to enlarge the children's vocabulary too far beyond their years. Mother, in her increasing anxiety, already had them up to about age 47. "Hey," one of the kids paused in mid-whine to complain. "You said you was going to take us to a national park." "Clam up," I counseled him, drawing upon my vast store of child psychology. "This is a national park." To keep the children amused until we found a park campsite, my wife invented one of those games which start with the idea of increasing the youngsters' awareness of their environment and end with them beating each other with tire irons in the back seat. As I recall, this particular game resulted in a final score of 3, 6, and 8 points. Each kid got 1 point for every square foot of ground he spotted first that didn't have any litter on it. I can recall a time when tourists visiting national parks appeared to be folks indulging themselves in a bit of wholesome outdoor enjoyment. Now they seem to have a sense of desperation about them, like people who have fled their homes 9 minutes before the arrival of Genghis Khan. Most of them no longer have any hope of seeing unspoiled wilderness, but they've heard rumors that the parks are places where the ground is still unpaved. Of course, if they want to see this ground, they have to ask the crowd of people standing on it to jump into the air in unison. The individuals I really feel sorry for are the serious practitioners of littering. Some of these poor souls have hauled their litter 1,000 miles or more, under the impression they would have the opportunity of tossing it out into a pristine wilderness, only to discover that they have been preceded by a vast multitude of casual wrapper-droppers. The Park Service does make a heroic effort to keep the litter cleared from along the highways, but it is handicapped because its rotary plows don't work well on paper and beverage bottles. Since there are many people who get the bends and have to be put into decompression chambers if they get more than 30 minutes from a shopping center, the parks, at least the one we were in, provide the usual cluster of supermarkets and variety stores. Here it was possible to buy plastic animals at a price that suggested they were driven on the hoof all the way from Hong Kong. I refused to buy my youngsters any of these souvenirs. I told them they should find something that was truly representative of the park, and they did. Each of them picked up and brought home a really nice piece of litter. I find the rangers to be about the most enjoyable things in national parks anymore. I always make a point to take my children by the ranger station to watch the rangers climb the walls. In recent years, the Rangers have been going on R&R in such places as New York and Los Angeles in order to get away from the crowds and noise and get a breath of fresh air. By the end of the peak season, they have facial twitches so bad they have to wear neck braces to guard against whiplash. The park bears aren't what they used to be either. Most of the bears you see along the roads look as if they've spent the past 5 years squatted in a chair before a television set, drinking beer and eating corn chips. Half of them should be in intensive care units. They've forgotten what it is that a bear is supposed to do. If panhandling along the roads were outlawed, they'd probably have to hustle pool for a living. A dose of pure air would drop them like a shot through the heart from a .44 Magnum. Any bear that wanders more than a mile from the road has to carry a scuba tank on his back filled with carbon monoxide. As far as the spectacle goes, the bears just don't have it anymore. I'd rather drive my kids across town to watch their Uncle Harry nurse a hangover. Now there's a spectacle. Camping in a national park is an invigorating experience. My 70-year-old mother went off looking for a restroom among the sea of tents, cabins, and campers. After about an hour of unsuccessful searching, she was loping along looking for a path that led off into the wilderness and came upon a wild-eyed man loping in the opposite direction. "Sir," she said as they passed, "could you tell me where I can find a restroom?" "I don't know, lady," he shouted over his shoulder. "I've been here for 3 days and haven't found one yet." Some parks still have excellent fishing in them if you can find it. But on the easily accessible streams, you would have better luck digging for clams in Montana. There are, of course, the tame fish planted by the Park Service, and these can be caught with a bent pin on the end of a clothesline with bubble gum for bait. The sight of a live insect or even a dry fly makes them nauseous. Catching one of them is almost as exciting as changing the water in the goldfish bowl. After being dumped into one of the park streams, the fish quickly adjust to their new environment, however, and within a week or two are consuming vast quantities of soggy hot dog buns and cigarette butts. Scientists estimate that eating one of these fish is equivalent to eating 2 loaves of bread and 4 packs of cigarettes. If anti-littering eventually catches on, a lot of fish will be up alongside the highways with the bears. They'll be begging smokes from tourists. Many people are under the mistaken impression that transistor radios come from Japan, but that is not the case. Transistor radios breed in national parks, and from there move out to infest the rest of the country. Their mating cries at night are among the most hideous sounds on earth, approximately on the order of those of catamounts with arthritis. The offspring are prodigious in number. During the day, you can see hundreds of youngsters carrying the baby transistor radios around the park. I proposed to a park ranger that a season be opened on the adults of the species with an eye to limiting the population growth. He said he himself was all for it, but that park regulations forbid hunting of any kind. The site on which we finally pitched our tent was in the middle of a vast cauldron of writhing humanity. This made it easy to meet interesting people. Several times I chatted with a fellow next door about his hobby of pumping the exhaust from his car into our tent. The fellows on the other side of us were members of a rock band. For a long time I thought they were just pounding dents out of their bus, but it turned out they were practicing. Their rendition of "A Truck Full of Empty Milk Cans Crashing into a Burglar Alarm Factory" was kind of catchy, but the rest of their stuff was much too loud for my taste. People would also drop into our tent at all hours. They would look about for a second or two, a puzzled expression on their faces, then leave. Then we discovered that the trail to the restroom passed under our tent. This discovery made Mother noticeably happy, and she vanished like a shot up the trail. I decided that the best thing to do was to give up on tenting and try to get into one of the park tourist cabins. After mortgaging our home and indenturing 2 of the children for 14 years, we managed to scrape together sufficient rent for 2 nights. The architecture of the cabin was about halfway between Neo-Shack and Neolithic. Frank Lloyd Wright would have loved it, because it blended so naturally into its surroundings, a superb replica of a hobo jungle. The only good thing about the cabin was that the roof didn't leak all the time we were there. Of course, if it had rained, there's no telling what might have happened. It is doubtful that the seine net used for roofing would have kept us dry, but I figured we could always set up the tent inside the cabin. Our days at the park were filled with the delights of viewing the marvelous phenomena. There was the spring hot enough to boil an egg in, and someone was running a scientific experiment to see if it would do the same thing for an old newspaper and a half-eaten hamburger. Reflection Lake was truly beautiful, with the scraggly spruce trees around its edges so sharply defined in the glass on the lake bottom that you could make out the hatchet marks on them. The painted rocks were interesting in their own way, especially where park employees had managed to remove some of the paint. The kids seemed to enjoy the ancient hieroglyphics to be found everywhere. Fred and Edith Jones, Peanut Grove, Caliph, 1968, etc. Then there were the antics of the wildlife. Once we were fortunate enough to observe 2 mature male Homo sapiens locking horns in a territorial dispute over a parking spot. Just when I finally found a way to amuse myself in the park, my wife insisted that we leave. She was afraid I would get arrested for trying to poach transistor radios with rocks. Also, while attempting to photograph a bald woodpecker, she flushed a covey of young people deeply engrossed in their own particular study of nature. If the truth were known, she was probably more flushed than they. Anyway, she said the only vistas she wanted to see for some time to come were the insides of the 4 walls of our mortgaged house. We hit the road for home the next day. Next summer, I think I'll skip the national parks and take my family to a place I know up in the Rockies. It doesn't have all the conveniences and accommodations of a national park, of course. The bears aren't especially friendly, but if you do see one, he doesn't look as if he recently escaped from an iron lung. If you have a sudden urge to buy a plastic animal, you just have to grit your teeth and bear it. The scenery isn't all that spectacular, unless you get a little excited over invisible air. The place doesn't even have a geyser, but when I get there, it will at least have an old geezer. Some people like to watch him sit on a log and smoke his pipe. In particular, a certain middle-aged woman and 4 ignorant kids. If you need more spectacle than that, you can always go to a national park.